On this Friday night, a first in the Iran war as Iran shoots down a U.S. fighter jet. The fate of the two people on board.
We're praying for them.
And the attack on the helicopters involved in the search and rescue. Quebec's expanding secularism law.
This is insane.
The confusion over what it might mean for religious processions. Artemis adventure.
I wish I could have got here sooner.
New images of our planet and the brief hiccup on the spacecraft. Plus, looking for a break in a sweet mystery. The new tool to track down 12 tons of stolen KitKats.
Global National. Reporting tonight, Colleen Christie.
Good evening. Thanks for joining us. For the first time since the U.S. and Israel launched war on Iran, 2 American warplanes have been shot down by the Iranians. Iran says an F-15 fighter jet went down with 2 crew members on board. The U.S. says its rescue mission came under fire as it recovered one of those pilots. The fate of the other is unknown. Iran says an Air Force combat plane also went down in the Persian Gulf region with a lone pilot who has been rescued. Vincent McAviney reports on the escalating risks of a drawn-out war.
The wreckage of a U.S. fighter jet. The Iranian military is claiming it shot down in the south of the country. This particular F-15E, a multi-role fighter, is normally based at RAF Lakenheath in the UK. The Iranian army quickly began searching for its 2-person crew. At least one of the ejector seats was found. Iranian media announced a bounty had been placed on the pilot and weapons systems officer. The US team, consisting of 2 helicopters and a refueling plane searching close to the ground, managed to recover 1 crew member, who's now receiving medical treatment. It's not yet known what happened to the second one. The rescue helicopters also came under small arms fire during the operation, reportedly injuring some of those on board. Another aircraft involved in the search, an A-10 Warthog, was also hit, with the pilot ejecting over the Gulf, where he was rescued. These are the first known cases of US jets being shot down over Iran during this conflict, despite claims from the White House that the war has been effectively won. Overnight, Iran's Revolutionary Guard released this footage of more missiles being fired at targets across the Middle East, including in Kuwait, where there were strikes on an oil refinery, as well as a power and desalination plant. These are critical pieces of civilian infrastructure in this dry region, providing clean drinking water to populations. Other missiles landed in Israel, causing damage to a factory and in a car park. No casualties were reported. But it's not just Iran that stands accused of hitting civilian targets. The US has destroyed a major road bridge outside of Tehran, killing at least 13 and injuring dozens more. The man responsible for the bridge's construction says it didn't have a military purpose. This project was only designated for civilian use, nothing else. Unfortunately, it has suffered serious damage and is almost completely destroyed. US President Donald Trump has threatened to send Iran back to what he's described as the Stone Ages. But with Iran still capable of mounting an effective defense, the US doesn't yet have the full air superiority he's claimed. Vincent McAviney, Global News, London.
There are reports 5 vessels have crossed the Strait of Hormuz since yesterday. 3 Omani-operated tankers, a Japanese gas carrier, and a French container ship. According to ship tracking data, the French vessel crossed Thursday. It's unclear how it secured safe passage, but Iran has said ships need to be from friendly countries to travel through the strategic waterway. It's believed to be the first French vessel to travel the channel since U.S.-Israel attacks began on Iran at the end of February. The White House is asking Congress to approve $1.5 trillion in defense spending, a boost of roughly 40% compared to last year. It's part of President Trump's 2027 budget, but it does not carry the force of the law. The request is largely symbolic, representing the government's priorities. If enacted, the amount would set a record for the most military spending in modern history. Just hours after U.S. President Donald Trump announced he had fired his Attorney General Pam Bondi, the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army and 2 other generals were also shown the door. As Jackson Proskow explains, the latest firings from the Trump administration show loyalty to the president doesn't guarantee job security.
For a nation at war, a purge at the Pentagon is both unusual and alarming.
Late Thursday, U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth told the Army's Chief of Staff, General Randy George, to step down and retire immediately. 2 other Army generals were also removed.
And here we are in a war, and he's firing the Army Chief of Staff of the Army and the Training and Doctrine Commander. This is just, and then of course the Chief of Chaplains. It's very, very shocking.
The abrupt dismissals came without any explanation, just as the U.S. Army deploys thousands of soldiers ahead of possible ground operations in Iran. But Hegseth has frequently dismissed those who do not share his views or vision.
The Secretary of Defense is placing personal loyalty over professional competence. What that is doing is harming the readiness of our country because he is purging our most experienced officers.
If loyalty is expected at the Pentagon, it seems to matter less at the White House, where President Donald Trump abruptly fired his Attorney General Pam Bondi Thursday.
There is no greater president than Donald Trump.
Bondi was a fierce backer of Trump, eliminating the traditional independence of the Justice Department, even hanging a large picture of the president on the building. In the end, it didn't matter.
I think President Trump felt she didn't have her foot on the accelerator.
Trump was reportedly frustrated with Bondi's mishandling of the release of the Epstein files and her inability to successfully prosecute his enemies.
Her failing was not a lack of loyalty, it was a failure to execute. The president made clear from day one that a top priority of his was using the Justice Department as a way to go after the people he felt had treated him wrongly.
The next Attorney General will likely be a fierce but more aggressive loyalist. In Trump's Washington, that may not be enough to guarantee job security. Jackson Proskow, Global News, Washington.
The Cuban government has pardoned more than 2,000 prisoners in what it called a humanitarian gesture in connection with Holy Week. In Havana, around 20 inmates walked free from La Lima prison and were greeted by loved ones. It's the second time Cuba has released prisoners this year. 51 detainees were freed last month. The country has been facing increased pressure from the U.S., which until recently cut off oil shipments to the island nation. NASA's historic Artemis mission blasted beyond Earth's orbit last night and has unveiled new images from the Orion spacecraft and its crew's journey to the moon. Today, NASA shared these images of the entire planet Earth taken by Artemis II's wing commander, Reed Wiseman. A spectacular view no human has had in more than half a century. Also on board, Canadian astronaut Jeremy Hansen has now traveled farther from Earth than any Canadian in history, as his crew shares more stunning views from space. Mike Armstrong is following the mission.
This is a live view from the Orion capsule looking back on Earth.
The Artemis II crew is moving away from their home planet at about 30,000 kilometers an hour. That's fast enough to cross Canada in less than 10 minutes. For the Canadian on board, the main emotion from the first couple of days has been disbelief.
I really like it up here. I wish I could have got here sooner. It's just such a tremendous place to be. The views are extraordinary. It's really fun to be floating around, and it just makes me feel like a little kid.
Good roll pitch.
The crew says the trip to space was smoother than they expected. The largest rocket humans have ever ridden didn't shake as much as they thought it would. They're still settling in, finding it a bit colder than they'd like, but they found places to sleep in zero gravity that the mission commander says is somewhat comical.
Christina has been sleeping heads down in the middle of the vehicle, kind of like a bat suspended from our docking tunnel. Victor's been up where Jeremy is right now. He's got a nice little nook wedged in there. And then Jeremy has been stretched out on seat 1, and I've been sleeping under the displays just in case anything goes wrong. It's more comfortable than you would think.
Integrity looks like a good burn.
Now, about 20 minutes after firing the engine and setting off for the moon, there was a brief scare. The crew got an alert there was a pressure leak in the cabin. For a moment, they had to consider aborting the mission, but it turned out to be a false alarm.
Houston helped us out. They confirmed they were seeing good cabin pressure, as were we on board. And we did the burn, and now we're on our way to the moon, feeling good about Integrity. She's a good ship.
Sometimes we don't get it fully right.
Now, NASA reports some problems with software and communications, but says nothing has been serious enough to turn around.
Open up this hinging door, and float on in.
One problem they had to fix was the toilet on board. It had a priming issue, one Christina Koch was able to remedy.
I'm proud to call myself the space plumber. I like to say that it is probably the most important piece of equipment on board.
Now, the next couple of days are a little less busy for the astronauts while they're in transit for the moon. They'll pass around the far side Monday, lose communications with Earth for a time, and then swing around for the trip home. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Montreal.
Advanced voting is underway for 3 pivotal by-elections that could determine whether Prime Minister Mark Carney gets his majority government. That includes 2 Toronto ridings left vacant by former cabinet ministers Bill Blair and Chrystia Freeland, who recently stepped down. Both seats are considered safe for the Liberals, but all eyes are on the Quebec riding of Terrebonne, which the Liberals won by a single vote in last year's election. Legal challenges over that result prompted the Supreme Court to order a redo. Winning all 3 would bring the Liberals up to 173 seats in Parliament, just 1 seat above the threshold for a majority. Nova Scotia RCMP have an update in the aftermath of First Nations protests over a raid on a cannabis dispensary that blocked several highways yesterday. Demonstrations were first sparked after police raided the dispensary on the Potlotek First Nation, arresting 2 people over alleged possession of illegal cannabis. A protest by community members quickly formed around the area, stranding RCMP vehicles, forcing officers to leave on foot. The protest blocked the highway next to the dispensary. That led to other groups across Nova Scotia blocking 3 other highways, disrupting traffic. RCMP say the protests have since cleared after dialogue with community leaders. The abandoned RCMP vehicles were found with broken windows, flat tires, and urine-soaked interiors. In Kenya, a Canadian man has pleaded not guilty to terrorism charges in a mosque attack in February. The 32-year-old appeared in court yesterday on 9 charges, including assault causing bodily harm. He's accused of posing as a worshiper, then attacking people with a machete. 5 people were taken to hospital. The new secularism laws find Quebecers at a crossroads. Coming up, why the annual Easter Way of the Cross procession may have to go by the wayside. And a company that pays donors for plasma is called to account by Health Canada. Pope Leo XIV presided over a solemn Good Friday Mass at St. Peter's Basilica, his first as pontiff. Christians around the world are commemorating the crucifixion of Jesus ahead of Easter. The traditional service took place just hours before Leo presided over the Way of the Cross procession at Rome's Colosseum. It was the first time in decades the Pope carried the wooden cross through all 14 stations. Here at home, hundreds of people in Montreal joined the Way of the Cross processions too, but there's a new legal landscape in Quebec this Good Friday. The provincial government has adopted a law that could crack down on the Easter weekend tradition. Phil Carpenter reports on what the change could mean for future processions.
Every Good Friday for years, Christians have been holding a religious procession through the streets of Montreal.
26 years, yeah.
It's called the Way of the Cross and commemorates the period leading up to Christ's crucifixion. On the mind of many at Friday's gathering, though, was a new secularism law and how it could affect future processions.
To be honest, I am not sure. I honestly don't know how it could affect it.
Bill 9, the new legislation, was adopted in Quebec Thursday and, among other restrictions, widens the ban on the wearing of religious symbols and forbids prayer in public spaces without municipal permission. That last part isn't clear to some worshippers.
As you saw, the procession takes place in silence. Does that constitute prayer? I don't know.
Organizers have always obtained permission to hold the event. Archbishop Christian Lepin, who led the walk, wonders what that's going to be like going forward.
Well, it might require more preparation, answering more questions.
He has spoken out against the new legislation and believes it is discriminatory.
It's not about being afraid of each other, or being afraid of other religion. It's about respecting each other.
A number of other groups also oppose Bill 9, arguing that it will fracture social cohesion and disproportionately impact racialized groups.
The government wants to get involved in issuing permits for practicing spirituality in Canada in the 21st century. This is insane.
The new law expands on Bill 21 and comes after the latter was challenged in the Supreme Court of Canada last month. A decision isn't expected for several months, so the Quebec government's move Thursday surprises some.
The Quebec government is continuing its assault on religious freedom, even though the highest court in the country has yet to determine the fate and the constitutionality of Bill 21.
While some are considering legal options against Bill 9, way of the cross participants say, at the very least, they want clarity. Phil Carpenter, Global News, Montreal.
Ahead, paying for plasma. Health Canada questions a donation company following the deaths of 2 donors. The House of Commons Standing Committee on Health is now ordering for-profit plasma collection company Grifols and Canadian Blood Services to hand over details around their confidential and exclusive 15-year deal. It comes after tense exchanges at a parliamentary meeting Grifols was summoned to last week, where MPs grilled the company over the deaths of 2 plasma donors. Melissa Ridgen reports.
While Health Canada investigates the death of 2 people after selling their plasma at Grifols facilities in Winnipeg, Parliamentary Committee ordered the company to appear for questioning.
You've asserted that the 2 deaths at the Grifols clinic were not connected to the fact that they were plasma donors. How do you come to that conclusion? Is that what the coroner has determined?
Our medical team has found no information, no correlation between plasma donation and death.
In addition to the investigations into the 2 deaths, Health Canada has restricted Grifols' license after inspections found problems at multiple plasma collection sites. Taxpayers fund Canadian Blood Services to manage the nation's blood and plasma supply. It has an exclusive 15-year deal with Grifols to collect plasma, needed for several life-saving therapies. Grifols pays donors based on how often and how much plasma they donate. But how much Grifols is paid for collecting plasma seems to be a secret.
What's the average payment you make to Canadians for their blood donation compared to your profit margin?
The details of the contract are confidential.
Has Health Canada been provided the agreement between Grifols and Canadian Blood Services? Yes or no?
Madam Chair, I don't have the answer to that.
The committee has ordered the agreement be submitted by April 10th.
This deal opened the door for-profit plasma collection in Canada. It created loopholes under around the provincial bans, and it really blurred the line between public health care and private profit.
Ontario, BC, and Quebec have banned paying for plasma, and Manitoba is considering doing the same.
People who are giving because they're incentivized to give frequently, and so this can mean they have downstream health effects. We also have a lot of inequality, a lot of poverty, a lot of vulnerability within Manitoba.
In 2024-25, Canadian Blood Services reported spending $1.7 billion. 60% of that is related to plasma products. Melissa Ridgen, Global News, Winnipeg.
Catching them all. How Vancouver police turned the tables on a suspected Pokémon card thief. Next. It's not just humans who need a little roadside assistance once in a while. Have a look. This bear cub was picked up by state troopers in New Jersey, found abandoned in a highway ditch. The cub was transported back to the barracks in the back of the police car and is now being cared for by the state. The popularity of Pokémon cards has soared along with their retail value, and that, of course, has led to thefts. In Vancouver, police believe the same suspect lured a string of victims online. Now, as Kylie Stanton reports, police have turned the tables on the Pokémon perps.
The object of the game is simple. Gotta catch 'em all. Something thieves have been taking all too literally.
They ended up getting away with close to $30,000 worth of Pokémon cards and products.
But now it's Vancouver police doing the catching.
Basically, we posted a card for sale in hopes of luring the suspect out. We were able to successfully make contact with the suspect the same day. We were able to take the suspect into custody without any incident.
Since March 23rd, there have been 5 incidents where victims met with a man to sell Pokémon cards usually listed through Facebook Marketplace. But the normally straightforward transaction quickly evolved into something more sinister.
The suspect asked if he could inspect the card. At that time, the suspect pulled out some bear sprayed the victim, and then ran away.
As Pokémon hits its 30th anniversary, the cards are surging in popularity. And at the same time, so are these crimes.
Theft is common when
supply is low, demand is high, and you can make a lot of easy money that way, right?
This is the holy grail of all Pokemon cards.
See, one of one.
While not all cards hold value, others, like Logan Paul's Pikachu Illustrator, went for as much as $16.5 million. And experts say high prices can mean high risk.
If somebody was bringing $20,000 in their pocket to a meeting with a stranger, and then that person mugged them for that money, would you be surprised?
Officers have recovered 2 of the cards, and the investigation is still ongoing. They're asking any additional victims to come forward. Kylie Stanton, Global News.
More than 400,000 KitKat bars are still missing after being stolen in Europe last week, and now the company behind the popular chocolate has launched a tracker to try to find them. The stolen bars are from the company's new F1 range, and Nestle has set up a website where people can enter the batch code of their chocolate to see if it's among those in the heist. The company says the truck carrying the candy left its factory in central Italy but never arrived at its scheduled destination in Poland. That's Global National for this Friday night. I'm Colleen Christie. Tonight's Your Canada is Prospect, Nova Scotia. We love seeing your Canada. Please email your photos to globalnational@globalnews.ca. Thanks for watching. Hope you'll join us again tomorrow. Good night.